Welcome to this week's episode of Moving Forward Talk with Diana. This platform is open to discuss various topics with the goal to motivate others to shape their future without limitation. This week I have with me Miss Aiysha Simon. Miss Simon, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me.
And I must say, Miss Simon is joining me from Brooklyn, New York, right?
I'm in Queens, New York.
In Queens, New York.
Mhm.
And our topic this week is toxic relationships. Miss Simon is going to give us some insight on how to identify toxic relationships and how to escape those relationships. Miss Simon, before we get into that, give us a bit of background about yourself.
So I am 44. I'm a single mom of two children. I am an occupational therapist by trade. I also am an event designer and an event planner. I've been in the New York City Department of Educational System for what's going on 10 years, but I actually resigned from there. But I have a huge background in pediatrics and working with children in occupational therapy. Currently, I'm doing home-based care therapy, so a lot of my work is um, basically geared around occupational therapy, but I also do a lot of work with event planning. I just started getting into podcasting. So I podcast. I have a show that I podcast about that really talks about life, love, and lessons. That's basically the title of the show, Life, Love, and Lessons with Aiysha. And then I also, due to the pandemic and having extra time to mull over things, I've gotten back into doing poetry again too. So I'm also doing poetry via several social media platforms.
And I must say that I have been listening for the past couple weeks. I have been listening to your poetry and I really do like them. I love them.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Now, what is toxic relationship?
So, I mean, me personally, I'm sure you can go to a dictionary or to the internet, you can look up toxic relationships and, you'll find a whole slew of things. But I think that, a toxic relationship really has to do with how you measure it for yourself, to be quite honest. I think it's any relationship that you have with another individual, and you can have a toxic relationship with yourself. But it's really a relationship that you have with someone in which it makes you feel unwell. And I think that that comes across in a lot of different ways, but as far as, I think the thing that stands out most when we hear about toxic relationships, most of the time people think about relationships, romantic relationships, and how that dynamic could be unhealthy and make somebody unhealthy in that situation or be unwell. But I think generally, it is really about your sense of well-being and how you feel in that relationship. And sometimes, even it goes further than that, because there's some people that are in toxic relationships and they don't realize that they're in a toxic relationship until maybe somebody else identifies it, because maybe it's something that they've been used to, maybe it's something that they were exposed to because of family issues or things that they've grown up around and seen all the time, and they might not realize that they're in a toxic relationship. But it really is about your well-being, whether it's your physical well-being, your mental well-being, your spiritual well-being, all of those things, your social well-being, all of those things combined, I say that it affects.
Great, awesome. And I'm so glad that you brought to our attention that most of us confuse toxic relationship as just being in a romantic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
What has your experience been with toxic relationships?
Well, first of all, I think we all probably have had our fair share of seeing or being surrounded by toxic relationships. Um, if you think, I'm just me personally thinking back about, even within my own family, because, I spend a lot of time just thinking about dynamics of people and things, and even within my own, like trying to process like why I might have gotten into certain types of relationships and things of that nature. So I think that, it's really important that we do some self work, some self introspection, and try to figure out what are some of the things that we've seen that may have um shape the way that we live our lives, basically the way that we choose the people that we surround ourselves with. Me personally, like I grew up with my mom and my dad. It was a pretty happy, family life. I had my four siblings, two brothers and two sisters. We didn't grow up with violence in the home. There was no loud and crazy arguments going on, nothing that really could be, identified as toxic in my family life. um, had I seen people maybe outside of my home that may have been in relationships that were a little bit more toxic? Yeah, absolutely. But it wasn't per se inside of my home. So that's why when I realized that I was actually in one, and after I got out of it and had time to really think about what that was all about, like how did I even get led to that particular situation? I think that one of the first things I thought about was, well, where did I, like, why would I get comfortable in that type of situation? Like, where have I seen that from? And trying to understand that. But I think that, it was something that was, part of it was something that was within me, and it was definitely something that was within my partner that made the relationship toxic. Um, I was with somebody who, you know, very early on, it was, an instant attraction, and things moved along. I mean, pretty slowly. We started out as friends, really, and spent a year of friendship, and nothing really jumped out to me. I mean, I was young. I also, let me say, I'm 44 now, but I also, when I was in this relationship, I was a teenager, so my mindset was totally different. My ability to identify certain things were different, but I did know how my mind and my heart felt, and I got to a certain point where they started to match up, and I started to be more aware of. It's funny because when I was in school was when I became more aware of, maybe this is not the healthiest of relationships. Um, because we started talking about some, basically having being in a toxic relationship, and I started to identify with some of the things that they were identifying, and I'm like, you know what, I think this might be unhealthy. And pretty fairly on, I said, fairly early on, I said, you know what, I think we need to go out and get some help for this. And it didn't start off. I think when we hear toxic relationship, I think a lot of times, people think about domestic violence, and they think about men and women, and they're fighting and doing all of this, but I think a lot of times it's a lot more subtle than people even realize. And a lot of times you're invested in the person. The person is not gonna knock you upside your head on your first date. Like it doesn't
Right.
usually happen like that. Usually it's a gradual process. They call it a grooming process, which, you know, I I don't think it was more a grooming process in my case, only because we both were really young. Um, so I don't think that was the case, but I do, in hindsight, do look back on certain things. And even sometimes today, I'm like, how in the world did I even let some of these things happen? Like some of the choices that I made, some of the things that I tolerated. I look back at my younger self sometimes, and I'm like, the thought that I say to myself, I'm like, yo, you was stupid. Like you really was stupid sometimes. But I also was in love. I also, big on loyalty, even from young. So I think that was part of it too, being loyal to a person who, and the thing is a lot of people will describe to you of things being like a roller coaster ride. You have the highs of the highs where you have this best time with this person that you love, and it's everything is just wonderful and romantic and magical and all that good stuff. And then sometimes the bad creeps in, and that's when you get the low of the lows, and that's when you're like, okay, this is not really good. And I think I got to a point where I was like, I knew it wasn't healthy, but I couldn't figure out how to get out of it necessarily. I was I was wrapped in it. Like it became a part of my daily every day.
And you said something that kind of triggered back something to my memory. We know it's toxic. We desire to end that toxic relationship, but
Mm-hmm.
there is something else there. Sometimes it's known and sometimes it's unknown, but there's another force there that's stronger, has a stronger hold on us to remain in that relationship. And one of the things that we do as humans, we judge. because we can see from the outside that that relationship is toxic, and we sit back and we wonder, why is that person still involved in that relationship? Now,
Right.
what is your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think that that's important to realize that a lot of times, because this is the society, the world that we live in. The bottom line is that people judge. People make judgments
Right.
about everybody every single day. Even on first glance about somebody, you've made a judgment about that person. I think the thing to remember, as far as that's concerned, is that a lot of times, you it's like, hmm, it's kind of like you become entangled
Mhm.
really quickly. You know what I mean? And it's almost like there's not an unawareness. Well, for some people, it's unawareness. But I think that what happens is that you don't even realize what it is until it's just you're so far gone. Almost a lot of times, I think that yeah, a lot of people think like, oh, that would never. The thing I always hear, that would never be me. Like that could never happen to me. I would never let a dude hit me. I would never let a female hit me. I would never. We live in a world of nevers. But my thing is like, you never know what you'll go through. You never know what you might become accustomed to. You never know what you might be accepting of. It's great to have that, that wherewithal to say that that would never be me. But because of the way that usually these type of things happen, like I said, you usually wind up in it and you don't even realize. Like sometimes I'll tell you, like from early on, there was a period where it was like, oh, I don't want you wearing tight clothes. I don't want you hanging out with this one. I don't want you going here. Oh, you're doing too much. Oh, you're laughing too hard. Oh, this, oh, that. It's like, it's all these things are just kind of being thrown at you. And in your mind, you're thinking, this person loves me. Like, so they must be telling me this out of love. Like, it can't be that they just don't like me. Like, it can't be that they just want to control me, So you're not even thinking about a lot of these things. And a lot of times, yeah, we are clouded by love. Sometimes we're clouded by lust. Sometimes we're clouded by lonely. Sometimes we're clouded by just not even knowing. Sometimes we're clouded by just outright need. Like you just feel like you need the person, or maybe you might become dependent on the person. A lot of times there's a codependency that happens that you guys are both feeding each other's needs for something. And that's how the relationship just continues on. So I think it
And
is real easy for us to say, "Oh, it would never be me," but you just never know because like I said, it's a gradual process. Usually, people are not, showing themselves if they're, abusive or if they're toxic. They don't usually show themselves very early on.
And just as you stated, sometimes we see that controlling behavior. Oh, I don't want you to go here, or I don't want you to wear this. I don't want you to hang out with that person. And we believe it's love or care, and we overlook that it's toxic. It's the controlling
Hmm.
part of that person. Now, how long were you in a toxic relationship?
I was in the relationship for over 20 years. Over 20 years. And, when I say it, sometimes it still feels and sounds a little crazy, but I think the thing also to remember is that a lot of times you become vested and invested in that person.
Mhm.
Like, and don't get me wrong, the person that this is with, I love them. Like, I genuinely love them, and I felt like they genuinely love me, and I still do think that they love me. But I think that the way in which they knew how to show their love wasn't the healthiest. And once again, the thing was that it wasn't all the time, and I think that's the part that people miss out on. It's like if it's just a little bit of this here and a little bit of that there, sometimes you can tolerate it a little bit more as opposed to somebody who might be going through this, getting beat up every single day or constantly being degraded every single day. For some, it's more of a small sprinkle, if you will, of the abuse or the hurt, or small sprinkle of the disrespect, and it's just enough where you can tolerate that for that time being, and then kind of come back into yourself basically. So I mean, I think that's the other thing to, a lot of times people think that like it's all horrible, but a lot of times it's not all horrible. Like the relationship was not all horrible. I mean, I had I had children during the course of the relationship, so it wasn't all horrible. And I'm not saying that this is a horrible person. I still love, to this day, I still love this person. But and let me also say this: I brought toxic stuff to the relationship as well. So I don't want to say that there was things that I was immature about and didn't fully understand. Some things I was just very naive about. I was naive about a lot of things. So I think that, and I brought a certain level of toxicity to the relationship as well. So I have to be honest about that as well. I think we have to be honest about the roles and the part that we play in things. And not to say that anybody deserves to be abused or disrespected or, anything.
Right.
But we also have to be forthcoming and honest with what role we play in things as well.
And great you brought that up because as I have learned it, as we know, a part of fixing us or fixing a broken relationship or fixing a broken family is for each individual who plays a part to take accountability, to own up to their contribution to what caused the brokenness. Because if we can't take accountability for our contribution, then we're only going to keep blaming the others who are involved. And then by doing that, we remain at the same level.
Right.
How did you escape now from the toxic relationship? And I don't want to sometimes I don't want to use the word escape as if you are in bondage, but how did you end it?
Well, it's funny because as soon as you said escape, I'm like, no, I don't want to give the wrong perception. Like, because for some people, they literally do have to escape. So I'm in no way, means, shape, or form want to diminish that at all. There's some people that have to have an action plan of how to get out of that relationship. Like, it's to the detriment to have a plan in order for them to escape safely. And actually, it's funny because I was just talking to a family member. We were sharing, some information with each other, and she revealed to me that she had to really, like, she had to get help from a social worker, and the social worker had to help her actually plan her escape with basically the clothing on her back with her child. So I think that there are times when you need an escape plan out of it. For me, I didn't need an escape plan out of it, and like I said, I don't, because I don't know if the person's gonna listen to this or see this, and I don't want to, I do, because it's a close relationship, and basically it's familial ties. I don't want to misrepresent anything, but I do want to. So I didn't have to escape, but the way that I did get out of it, I mean, it ended on a pretty sour note. I mean, something happened, and I was just like, you know what? It was like the straw that broke the camel's back, and I was just like, I can't anymore. I've tried therapy all throughout. I'm a huge proponent of therapy, but it really does take two active participants who want it to work and who want to put in the work, put to work. And we gave therapy a go one last time, just so at least we can, try to make sure that we were better co-parents. And it didn't go so well. And I mean, that was pretty much it. I mean, I got strong enough to just say, you know what, like, I can't do this anymore. It's not healthy for either one of us. It's not healthy for, our family no more. And I walked away, and that was it.
How did you heal? What was your healing process like?
My healing process was time, self-introspection, forgiveness. Like, I'm not a huge person to like hold grudges. So I forgave it. Have I forgotten? No. But I've definitely forgiven. um and honestly, I feel like I honestly believe that everything does happen for a reason. Even the things, when I look back over my life, the most horrible is the things that have happened. I'm like, you know what, that was for a reason, and it was a lesson that came out of it. And to be quite honest, it's like everything shapes us for a reason, and everything puts us exactly to where we're supposed to be for exactly whatever moment. And it's funny because I'm like, clearly, had I not had that, maybe I might not have been on your show right now. So it's like, you know what I mean? So everything connects us to where we're supposed to be in every exact moment that we're supposed to be at. It helps us to learn the lessons that we're supposed to learn. And the other thing I think it is, it helps us to help other people, which I genuinely believe that's what we're here to do. So even if me just saying, telling my story, or just, being like, listen, sis, just be more aware of, and even brother, because I'm not gonna say that it's just women that are in toxic relationships or being abused. It's men
Right.
too. Um, you know, but if somebody just hears this, even if they second guess, like, you know what, maybe I'm not in the most healthiest of relationships, then at least I've done that part. If somebody isn't one and they feel like they need to develop an escape plan, then, to safely get out of it, then at least I'm a part of that. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm in the business of helping people as much as possible, delivering a message and delivering a lesson. These are all life lessons. Like, had I not, learned about certain things, I may still be where I used to be. I don't know, but I'm grateful that I'm in a happier headspace. I mean, I feel like I've done a whole lot of work on myself. I do believe in self introspection. I believe in, you really sitting down and processing. And sometimes you can do that with yourself, or sometimes you need to do that with other people, whether it's a friend, a relative, somebody, a confidant, a therapist. We really do have to have time when we sit down and we really think about our lives and the choices that we make, or what's leading us to make certain choices. And, what is it that we want? Because we really, if you're living a life where you're not at peace, where you're unhappy, where your mental, physical, social well-being is at stake or is being jeopardized, you need to do something about that. And I'm a huge proponent of mental health. I mean, a lot of my work is mental health work. Like, you can't address people most of the time without having to deal with some form, shape, or form of dealing with people's mental. So I think it's extremely important that, we take that into account in all that we do. And as much as possible, your show's called Moving Forward, but I also believe in paying it forward. Whatever I have, like, it doesn't take anything from me to share anything that I have. And so I say, as much as possible, if I can give something to somebody else and it's not taking anything off of me, why not do it?
Excellent. And I must ask though, your poetry, is that a part of your healing
Mm-hmm.
process?
You know what? It's funny because I used to write poetry when I was younger, very younger, and I got away from it. When I was in the
Mhm.
relationship that I was in, I got away from a lot of things that I used to love. Like, I used to draw, I used to paint. I stopped doing a lot of stuff, and I think that's one of the other things. Like, if you find yourself getting away from yourself, you might not be in a healthy relationship. And I realized, and I'm like, even with this quarantine and corona, it's been a blessing because I was able to sit more with myself and get back to things that I love. Like, I almost forgot that I love poetry so much. So yeah, poetry has become like my personal vent session. A lot of the poems that I write are about either myself or things that I've seen, things that I think. I'm an overthinker, so like my mind is always spinning about different things. And yeah, so sometimes just even just have a release of just thought, I'll write. Actually, when we get off, I'll probably be writing. I'll be writing tonight. You'll see some new stuff up there. But yeah, it's therapeutic. It's therapeutic to write. It's therapeutic to talk. For me, I think we all need to find out for ourselves, what is therapeutic to you. Is it therapeutic to talk to your girlfriends? Is it therapeutic to talk to your homeboys? Is it therapeutic to write or to keep a journal? Is it therapeutic to grab a pillow and scream into your pillow? Like, whatever it is that's therapeutic for you, we need to get to it. And if you find yourself drifting away from yourself, you need to examine what's going on in your world, and do something about it.
And I just have to say a little nugget. And as my pastor would say, this is a free commercial. You say, when you get off here, I'm going to write. And I'm thinking, it's 1 a.m. in the morning, right?
And this is my time. Like, this is my time when I'm up by myself and it's quiet because my kids are sleeping, and the thoughts I just have to get them. Sometimes I literally cannot sleep. Like, I have a poem or a thought because I do the other podcast too. So like sometimes I just have a thought that I'm like, no, 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 I gotta just get this out. I can't sleep. Yeah.
And I do find myself doing that a lot. I think this hour in the
Mm-hmm.
morning. but I don't write. I just get my phone and I send myself a voice note. And then,
Yeah.
you know, I pick up my phone, record myself, you know, with whatever I
Mm-hmm.
have to say. And then, but that's a little bit more work. I probably
Really.
do need to. Yeah. So I'm looking, you saw me keep looking at my phone, and I'm looking for one of your
Mm-hmm.
poetry, and I just cannot find it. And I know I spoke to you about that before. And I kind of wanted you to
Mm-hmm.
elaborate on that one a little bit.
Which
And I actually can't remember which one it was, but it was about love. And when I listened to it,
mm-hmm.
I actually thought about being divorced, like a betrayal.
Mm-hmm. It was called hold on, I'm gonna pull it up. I'm sorry. I mean, basically, and it's funny because a lot of times I write about, you know, stuff that happened. It's a backstory to that particular piece. Excuse my eyes for being down because I'm looking at my screen right now.
Right.
But basically, it was I was actually cleaning up and I found my engagement ring. And actually, it's funny because not only did I find my engagement ring, but I also had my what was supposed to have been my wedding band because I was given both of them together. And so when I found it, it just kind of put me in the headspace of like, wow, like how things kind of come full circle for you, you know? Like I remember being so much in love and when I tell you that like I'm in like I'm like probably one of the most sappiest people you ever meet in your life. Like I'm like, oh, like that's my personality. Like I love love. Like
Right.
and I'm like, some people might feel a little, angst about this, but I'm like, and I especially love black love. I'm like a huge proponent of love. Like, I mean, love is love, and people will say that, but like, there's something about black on black love that I'm just enamored with. And when you see it, you feel it, you know it. I definitely was able to experience it through my grandparents and my parents and
Mhm.
my babies now, and other people that surround me. But it's something about being in love, and it just shot me back into remembrance of being in love. And it's like, honestly, like when you have relationships, you go through these peaks and valleys, right? And it's like, I remember like it was almost like a movie. And when I opened up that box, I just got shot back to like, wow, like, yo, I remember when you gave me this ring. Like, I remember the feeling that I felt. I was actually pregnant when I got engaged to. And I just remember thinking, and the ring to me was just so beautiful, and now I'm like single and I'm like, geez, like that was just it was just such a good time in my life. Like I really, and then you paint these pictures in your mind of how things are going to be for you. Like
Mhm.
I was like, I just knew I was going to be married and it was going to, I never thought about having a white picket fence and all of that stuff. But, in my mind, I knew I was going to be married and, I was going to have my husband and have this family life and we were going to do the damn thing together. That was my thought.
Right.
And when I saw that ring, it just shot me back into remembrance of like, wow, that's not my life right now. But you know what? Things came full circle because even though that's not my life anymore, I'm genuinely happy. I know that one day I will, be in that same headspace again where I'll be in love again. And I'm staying, I'm hopeful. I'm a hopeless romantic, but I'm also hopeful. I believe in love. And I know that one day I'm gonna get back to that. Um, but the ring, seeing the ring just made me remember everything all over again. And then with the relationship ending, it was like a divorce. I mean, being with somebody that long,
Right.
it was basically like going through a divorce. It wasn't a smooth, easy 1, 2, 3 breakup. Like, oh, we're done with each other, because we're not done with each other because clearly we have children together. So it wasn't a one and done type of situation. So yeah, it was like a divorce, and you know when it happened, it was very painful. And so seeing the ring, just like I said, just brought back a lot of memories. It's called 360 Degrees of Shine.
I thought that was, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I don't know if it is, but I'm just gonna have to ask. I don't remember the title, but I'm gonna
Yeah, that's it.
and I guess it puts me in mind for divorce because I was divorced or I am divorced. So it puts me in now when I sat there and listen and start reminiscing. I'm like, oh, I need to ask, is this about her or is just poetry? Because it seems so real, like I'm walking right through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah. But
your
that's
other
good though.
one,
At least that means that I'm doing my job as a poet.
yes, you are. Yes, you are. What about talk
Okay.
about your poet? I'll be loving on me.
So basically, that poem is about just the love that I have for myself, and that didn't happen. That's not something that happened overnight. You know,
Right.
I genuinely love myself. Like, and I'm like, whoever want to hear it, I'm gonna tell them. Like, I do. Was I always there? My self esteem was not the best, and I think that was part of the reason why I was in the relationship. And the other thing I want to say is that that wasn't the only time that I was in a toxic relationship. I'd been in other toxic relationships as well, and it became a pattern. Um, and I think part of that reason was because of my own self-esteem, because of my own thought process. I wasn't loving on myself. Since I was little, I was born fat. I've always been a fat kid. When I was in elementary school, I got made fun of for it. So I was very self-conscious, very uncomfortable in my own skin. I never wanted to be by myself. Like, I hated being alone. Like, it was scary to me to be alone. You know, then I got to a certain point where I was like, I just started forcing myself to be more comfortable with myself. I'm like, listen, you're with yourself all the time. Like, you gotta get comfortable with yourself. So I basically started, like I tell people all the time, I started dating myself. Like, I would go out for walks by myself. I would read books by myself. Like, I would do all kinds of things. One time I remember, like, and I think I was like a young adult at this point, maybe even a teenager. I remember going to a movie theater by myself. Like, this is really weird and awkward. Like, people in the movie theater like booed up and stuff, and I'm here by myself looking like a weirdo. But I'm like, you know what? I'm like, finally I did it, and I was able to do it, and I was like, I made it through. I didn't die. I wasn't super embarrassed. Like, you know. So more and more, I forced myself to become more comfortable with myself. And then, as a young teenager, I really like grew into my body because I was a little bit more advanced young. Like, I had breasts really young, I had hips and everything really young, but it still wasn't, I wasn't really quite there. As a teenager was when I really started like coming into myself, like had what they call body and stuff, and was really feeling myself. Like, it was
Right.
wearing really small, skimpy clothes and stuff like that. And then I got to a point when um I think over the course of time, I started to lose confidence in myself, started to gain a lot of weight. Um, at my heaviest, I was like 275 pounds. And I think a lot of that had to do with being depressed and just not, having a lot of healthy behaviors and attitudes. And so I definitely was not healthy and was not really loving on myself very much. And getting really down on myself, and after a while I said, you know what? I gotta change this. And I got on a journey to change myself and got back into not shape because I'm like, I'm never gonna, I have this theory. I'm just like, not everybody's meant to be a stick. Clearly, like, my body is not designed for me to be a stick. I'm never gonna be a stick. I don't care what I'm doing, but guess what? I don't want to be a stick. I love
Okay.
having curves. I think that I'm a beautiful woman. I think that I'm a
You
beautiful
are.
person.
Yeah.
I have flaws like everybody else. Like this, this tummy, I'm not trying to let her come out and play with nobody, but I have things that I don't want to hide. But overall, do I love myself and the skin that I sit in right now in this moment? I absolutely do. Are there things that I want to work on? Absolutely. Like, I want to get rid of these flappy arms and this tummy. But I be loving on me is really about self-acceptance. I'm not into the body shaming and all that other stuff. Like, people do this all day, every day, and it's disgusting to me. It's like we weren't meant to all be the same size. Otherwise, God would have made us all the same size. He would have made us all one same skin tone, gave us all the same hair texture, same teeth, same eyes. We are all divinely designed to be exactly what it is that He wanted us to be. And I'm saying to the world that I be loving on me because I love myself. I love every curl, every dimple, every, piece of brown that's here. And whoever don't like it, too bad for you, but I know I'm loving on me. So that's what that poem is all about.
I'm loving this. I'm loving this because last week Monday I had an episode, haven't uploaded that yet, and it's called Self Love. And it's nothing, you can experience no better feeling than self love. Your self love and creating your own happiness is a wonderful feeling to have.
Right.
And I was sharing with her that there was a time when I didn't want to look in the mirror because didn't like what I see in the mirror. Now I have mirrors everywhere. I'm driving, my visor is down because I'm looking at this beautiful queen who I'm in love with, who I love so much. And I was just having this conversation right before you came on with my daughter about loving ourselves, about being appreciative of ourselves, accepting ourselves, regardless of body image.
Right.
And
it's so important. It really is.
Yes. Because if we don't love ourselves, even if someone comes along and try to love us, we won't be acceptance of that love.
I think of it like a force field, like with my children, I make it a point to tell them how beautiful they are, how smart they are. Because I tell them, I'm like, you're going to be out in the world, even within your own household. People are going to say things to you that are negative and nasty. People are going to tell you all kinds of things, what you are not, what you are, what you can't be, what you can't do, what you can do. You're going to be hit with a barrage. But if we layer them up with self-acceptance, that's like the screen for all the bad that's going to come their way. Because regardless of whatever dude's going to come my daughter's way, she's going to be like, I'm not even listening to what you got to say. You can say whatever you want to say, because I know my mama told me I'm beautiful, that I'm a princess, and I'm a queen in training. That's what my mama told me. My son can tell you the same exact thing. So I'm like, this is what we have to do. We have to fortify. It's like it really is like a force field that you build up around yourself, a force field that you build up around your children, even each other. Like, I'm like, why are we not, I find that, like, as Black women, a lot of times, like, we be stingy on the compliments. Like, if I see a sister looking good, I'm gonna tell you, like, sis, I love that hair, great lipstick, I love that dress. Like, there's certain things that we could be doing to build ourselves up, but to build other people up as well. And it doesn't take anything away from you to give a compliment. It doesn't take anything away from you to say positive words to somebody. So yeah, why are we building up our own force fields and building up the force fields of everybody else? We should. Self-acceptance is the weapon against self-destruction and self-hatred, to be quite honest.
Because yes, if we don't love ourselves, and when we're being talked about in a negative way, it sure do brings on depression. It brings on various mental health issues. Yes. And so I have to ask. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was saying that I was talking about this earlier today because I just did like a little YouTube post earlier today, because I also do like videos and stuff, and I put them on YouTube. But I was reading something because I recently joined like an online dating group, and I was reading some of the comments, and somebody had posted about women having bad bodies, this quote about bad bodies. And I'm like, what are we talking about? So I'm reading the comments, and some of the guys are really going in on the women about what they can't stand about women's bodies, or what they constitute as a bad body. And it was so disgusting that I was just like, first of all, this is body shaming, number one. But I'm just like, what, like, do these dudes not have moms or sisters or real women around them? Like, how is it okay for you to sit there and bash somebody over a body that more than likely is a hereditary body, more than likely is a body that They don't have any like control over. You know, a lot of us are born into certain bodies. Maybe some people are top heavy and they're smaller on the bottom or whatever. And it's like for, you know, especially for men, I'm like, we have to be real careful with how we talk about certain things, especially when it's men talking about women, and you know, and vice versa. But I think that people sometimes forget their influence that they have over other people when they make certain opinions about things, or when they make certain statements about certain people, that you really can have an effect on people's well-being and people's mental health. There might be somebody in the group that will read that post and take that as they need to kill themselves because nobody will want them. So I think we
Right.
have to be real careful. And this is what I talked about earlier. Real careful with what we put out into the universe, what we put out into the world. And if it's really that negative, maybe it's something that you need to rethink. Like, or maybe it's a way in which you could. Because my thing is like, I always want people to tell me the truth. So like, if somebody thinks that like I'm unhealthy, for example, sometimes it's really about your delivery. You can tell somebody that they're unhealthy and you can deliver it in a way that sounds loving and like you care about them. Like, listen, sis, Aiysha, I see you eating fried chicken every day. It's probably not the healthiest for you, sis. You know, why don't you think about maybe a healthy option? That might be more well received versus you're a fat A and you always eating greasy A chicken, and you
Right.
know you ain't never gonna lose no weight. You know what I mean? And maybe the way that you put it might put somebody over the edge into having a mental health break, or being depressed, or maybe being suicidal. So we have to be real careful with what we put out into the world, and with the statements that we make, especially when it comes to something that could affect somebody else's mental health and well-being. Absolutely.
Absolutely, because we never know that person's mental health well-being.
Hmm.
We don't know it just by sitting there looking at the person. We don't know what the person's actually going through mentally. So you are so correct. We do have to be very careful. Now, before we wrap up, I've always asked, because sometimes I may not ask a question that afford you the opportunity to speak on something else that you may want to share. So is there anything else you want to share to our audience?
Um, I mean, I would just say, you know, at the end of the day, it's this life is a journey. You know, you take from it as much of it that you can. You know, I think that it is really important. You know, I'm a huge proponent of mental health. You know, I know especially in the black community, mental health is really stigmatized. You know, people don't want to either admit that they have a problem, they don't want to be identified as having a problem. But you know, I like to say that, you know, first of all, mental health is part of your health. That's number one. So if you know, just even thinking that, you know, I have this analogy that I like to say, like, you wouldn't stay home with a broken leg, right? Like, you would go to a hospital, you would go to your doctor, you would get your x-rays, you would do all of that stuff. So why would you stay home if something is broken within your mental? We need to start thinking about it in the same type of way. There is no shame in if you are having a mental health issue. And even if it sounds, because you know, it even sounds like, oh, mental health issue. Like, no, but we all have mental health issues. If you really think about people, nobody is well all the time, 100% of the time. There's going to be times when you might be melancholy. There's going to be times when you might be sad. There's going to be times when you might be frustrated. There's going to be times when you might be angry or upset or depressed or whatever it is. So we all go through emotions and feelings because we are human. And so I say
Right.
we need to really get back to understanding that part of the human experience is having emotions and feelings. And sometimes they don't match up with what you want. Sometimes they don't match up with what you need for yourself. Sometimes they don't match up to the point where you're not able to do the things that you need to do for yourself or get out of life what it is that you want to get out of life. And so you sometimes do need to seek out help. There's no shame in seeking out help. If you think about it, just as importantly as you would go to get a blood test, you might need to go and speak to a professional. You know, there and this is the thing. I believe that, you know, God puts everything here for a reason and a purpose. You know, and I there are some therapists that are gifted at their craft, because it's a craft to be a therapist, especially a mental health therapist. You know, it really is a craft to be able to use yourself to help somebody else to be better, and to help them to get themselves to better. But I think that there's absolutely no shame in it. I think we have to really start to take out the stigma of mental health as this thing. It's not a thing. This is a normal part of your health and wellness. If you start to think about it more like that and take out the stigma, but I think that we will be better as a community. People will reach out a lot more, and people will be less shamed into not reaching out and not getting the help that they want. We need to stop thinking that things don't happen. We are Black people. We are not bulletproof. Things get to us. Especially when it comes to Black men. I think a lot of times people seem to think that Black men don't need help, or they don't need to speak to anybody. That they're bulletproof. But a lot of our men are suffering, you know, and it's no shame in them reaching out for help, whether it's from a fellow brother or sister or a therapist, whatever. Sometimes it's a coach, you know what I mean? Sometimes it could be a boss or a colleague or coworker. So there's no shame in reaching out, but I think that if you do need help, if you find that you're not satisfied with your life, you're finding that you're unhappy, you're finding that you're unfocused, you're finding that your mind is constantly running, like all of these things are signs that you might need to do something to address your mental health and well-being.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I really want to thank you for sharing. And I hope that all the viewers who will view this video will apply it. Don't just listen, but apply it, because there's some great tips that were shared. Thank you again for joining.
Thank you.
And this have been, you're welcome. And if you're out there, you need some guidance, you need some support, reach out. We're here to support each other, to uplift each other, to help each other along whatever pathway we're going. Until next week, this has been Moving Forward Talk with Diana.